Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast with my buddy Brandon, and we're talking about staff transitions. It is an incredible coaching conversation talking about how do you move people off the team if they no longer need to be on the team, or even move them into a different seat. What do those conversations look like? How do you handle those conversations? I think you're going to enjoy this coaching time that we have with Brandon. Also, I want to remind you to check out churchboom.org, and you can check out Church Boom University. It's something that we've created that you as a pastor leader can continue to grow. We will send you quarterly resources. There's master classes. You can learn how to develop volunteer culture, how to create generosity in your church, how to create leadership ladders. Church Boom University. Check it out on our website, churchboom.org. And also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Instagram is church.boom and Facebook is Church Boom. And there's a lot of great content on the social media channels as well. So make sure to check those out. And hey, let's jump now into the conversation with Brandon. It is an amazing conversation. I know you're going to love it. Let's jump into it, man. How can I serve you today?
Yeah, I had a few questions. One of them is about success. Been thinking about this a lot personally, but also as a church. So phrase it this way: what is the best way to determine success in ministry, both for a pastor as well as for a church?
Oh man, that's a great question. It is because I think that I think we can confuse them, or we can be successful in one lane and not the other. One thing I always say is success outside the home never compensates for failure within it. So someone's, a corporate person or whoever, or ministry. Hey man, I'm really successful in my church, but my family's a mess. Success outside the home never compensates for failure within it. I will talk first about the church. I do think that living things grow. I think that you have to keep growing as a church. I think that people need to be discipled. I think that the church needs to be growing. I believe that it needs to have impact in the community and in people's lives. I don't think that churches should plateau. I think living things grow. And so I look at a church and I say, you got to keep growing. You got to grow in your, I think you need to look at the different kind of areas that are important, numerical, financial, spiritually, kind of looking at those areas and saying, are we growing? Is our people growing personally? Are they learning to reach people? Are they being generous? Are we caring for our community? Are we moving in the right direction? I don't think a church should stay stagnant. 84% of all churches right now are either plateaued or declining. 84%. I don't think that should be us. I think that we should be growing. Living things grow. As it pertains to the minister, not the ministry, but the minister, I think there's some real practical things, that everybody talk about, like, relationship with your kids is good, relationship with your spouse is good, and, that kind of thing. I think that's all important. But a few little barometers that I've learned, because I'm older than you, my kids are growing up. I would say a couple things that I've wanted and I've had a heart's desires. I don't want my family to feel like they sit in the back seat of the church. I want them to feel like they're the most important thing to me. That's number one. I think that's a sign of success for a pastor when their family feels like we're the most important thing to our dad, or our dad more than the church. Our dad feels that we're the most important thing, or my husband feels I'm the most important thing. Whatever, that kind of thing. Number one is the importance. Number two is they're not bitter against the church. That's a hard thing to do, because we're going to get hurt by the church. Then we bring that hurt home. Then we bring that frustration home, and that person left the church, and that person talked poorly about us or whatever, and we talk about. I think you have to be really careful. I'm not ever saying to be dishonest, but I think you have to be careful what you reveal and don't reveal. You don't want them to become bitter. You don't want them to become angry. You don't want them to become like, man, I'd never be a leader at the church. That sounds too painful. You don't ever want them to get there. So that they don't hate the church. And then I think the ultimate goal of everything is, does my family love Jesus? now and in the future. Man, if you can accomplish that while growing the church and while keeping the church moving forward, I think you're a radical success. Those are the things that I think are barometers for the church life as a pastor, both for the church life and also the family life.
That's good. Yeah, I've been the question comes out of me just, we have the tendency, I think, as pastors to kind of look other directions and see what other churches are doing. And, rather than focusing on what I could do with what God's given me in my context. So,
yeah. Well, remember,
those are
Brandon, real quick, is that just remember this, because you talked about that. And I think we're all guilty of that as pastors. I think we look around and go, why is that guy growing? Why is that guy getting bigger? Why is that church doing better? We all do it. Yeah. But our competition, we always have to remember that our competition isn't with another church.
Right.
Our competition is what's possible for us. Our competition is with what's possible for us. The scripture says to one he gave 5 talents, to one he gave 2, to one he gave 1. I don't, if a person is a 3-talent person, let's say a 3-talent person, whatever, if that's what God gave them, their ability, their gifting, whatever, that's not a problem. That's God's choice. God determines the talent. We determine the choices. But he gives the 3 talents. Someone asked me one time, how do you measure someone's personal success as a pastor? And I said, one of the things is, are you a 3-talent leader living at a 2-talent level? That's the problem. That's a problem. Not everybody's John Maxwell and writing all these #1 books. He's a 5-talent leader. There's no question about it. But if Bob is a 3-talent guy, but he's living at a 1-talent level or 2-talent level, that's the problem. That's back to your competition with other churches. It's with what's possible for you. You got to look and say, am I really being the absolute best leader, driver, entrepreneur leader, pastor? Am I doing everything I can? Or am I kind of settling in at that 2-talent level when I'm actually probably a 3-talent person? And those are the kind of questions someone says, well, how would I know? I'm like, okay, well, are you growing personally? Who coaches you every month? Who's challenging you every month? What financial investment are you making into your own leadership? I love going to school. Went back to school, got a master's. I know you got a doctorate and all. I think that's great. But who's your coach? Not who's your spiritual mentor.
Yeah.
I have spiritual mentors in my life that don't have a clue how to grow a church. But I need people that know how to grow a church and know how to grow ministries and know how to organize things. Like, am I getting all the content, all the help, all the resources, all the coaching? Am I getting everything I can so that when I meet Jesus, I'm like, I don't know if I did it right, but man, I learned everything I could and I swung the bat. That to me is the challenge. It's not with other people. It's with the competition is with what's possible for you. That's and you're the only one that can answer that. Because I meet certain guys that are like, I don't know, man, it just kind of seems like, it's been 5 years, and if I'm honest, we're puddling along here, and I look at them, and these guys I know real well. I'm like, well, I don't know. Are you getting coached by no one? No, not really. Okay, do you attend a lot of conferences? No, not really. Are you really growing, developing, figuring out how to do that? Are you wrestling with stuff? Do you, and the answers often come back no. I'm like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. I have 2 coaches in my life. I get coached all the time. And people say, well, that's an expense. No, that's an investment. It's not an expense. There's a big difference. And that's the issue for me. The issue is what's possible for you. That's what we all have to ask ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. That helps out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to figure out how I can take this and, teach my staff a lot of these things too, because I know they have these questions as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
One of the next things I have is something I've been wrestling with, and you helped me out with this a couple summers ago, I think, when I gave you a call. But as pastors, how do we lead our peers and friends? And another kind of follow-up question would be, when do we choose leadership over friendship?
Yeah. When you say how to lead, how to lead peers, is that what you said? Lead peers and friends? That what you
Yeah,
said?
so like,
Yeah.
we took over the church, and we're trying to, in ministry, you're not like a CEO just having employees. Like, you develop friendships, and as you're
Right.
discipling and living life together, and yeah, just what's the best way to lead friends? Maybe that's a better way to say it. But as you're
Yeah.
developing friendships with them, and you're
Yeah.
still a leader in the role, you still are a leader. So how to do that well, or when do we have to
Yeah.
choose leadership over friendship?
Well, this is my answer to that is a straightforward one, and most people are like, "What?" Because I always hear that when when I'm talking to different people, whatever. Is you choose the weakness and the problem and the challenges often in a dysfunctional church or staff is when the pastor is choosing friendship over leadership. My thing always is leadership always wins. And here's what I mean by that. Leadership over friendship has to win. Okay, man, it's really hard to deal with this staff member of mine, and if I'm honest, I'm letting it get away with stuff. Why is that? Because he's my friend. Okay, then you're choosing friendship over leadership. That's a mistake. And I see that over and over. They won't have the difficult conversation. They won't have they won't
Yeah.
address the situations. They'll let it slide. We've become such good friends. Don't get me wrong. I think you want to have friends. I mean, some of my executives over the course of my life, even right now, are just some of my closest friends. But I'm never going to allow that to win over the difficult conversation. I'll have the difficult conversation. I'll deal with it. And they know that I will. And they'll have the difficult one with me if they need to have one with me or bring something up to me. But I'm not going to let the friendship win. And so some people are like, man, that doesn't sound like you care about people, or that doesn't sound like, it's like, don't you care about friends and relationships? No, you're not getting the point. I'm not going to let their friendship win over the difficult conversation, the tough decision, or whatever. I'm not going to let that happen. To me, that's the balance. You got friends, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
But never let it water down your leadership. Never let it water down your leadership. If you have to have the conversation, you have to have it. If you have to have the difficult, decision, you got to have it. You got to make it. Yeah. So anyway,
That's good.
That's the way I do it. And I feel like, I've made mistakes in that area. I think of a buddy right now that, man, went through it. Like, the executive pastor left, and then he took like 5 staff members with him, and the church split, and this, that, and the other thing. And he called me one day. I remember the exact street I was on when my phone rang, and it was him. He goes, hey, remember a year ago when you said I'm often making the mistake of choosing friendship over leadership? He goes, I never corrected that, and here's what's happening. And I told him, I said, I see it. The writing's on the wall. You're choosing friendship over leadership, and it's going to hurt you if you don't deal with this. He didn't deal with it. A year later, it was disastrous. Church of, 1,400, probably lost 300, 400 people. 7 staff members. It was a debacle. But it all came down to friendship over leadership. You can't choose that.
When you say allow, it's kind of more like a cultural thing too, in a way. Like, if you allow it, then you're saying is that here on staff, our friendships are more important than difficult conversations, or we're allowing the dysfunction to transpire because we don't want to lose friends, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah. And yes, 100%. And I would even add to that. I always say messages inspire, but systems change behavior. So here's the question. What's the system by which you're going to create the kind of culture where leadership wins? So, for instance, you've heard me talk about artificial harmony. You've heard me talk about Matthew 18. Whenever I do a board meeting, Matthew 18 is on every agenda. Whenever I do a staff meeting, Matthew 18 lives. It's a living statement on every agenda. Because it's like, hey, before we begin our meeting, let's have a Matthew 18 moment. Is there anything that we need to deal with? Is there any issue? Oh, there is? Okay, let's talk about it. Oh, there isn't? Okay. If there's one between me and you, Brandon, or me and you, Tom, then let's deal with it after. If it's too personal, then we'll deal with it after. But we do not live in artificial harmony here. We address the difficult conversations. That's not a teaching. That is an exercise you do at every meeting. Literally, have the Matthew 18 has lived on my agendas going on 10 years now since I started doing it. Every meeting. It's rare that anything is like that. You know why it's rare? Because we're already dealt with it in a different office. Because we just know that that's our culture. If you want culture by definition is a set of attitudes or behaviors. That's the behavior and attitude you want to create. You can't just teach on it and go, everybody's got it. Now I did a really good teaching on it. No, you got to teach on it and then say, now moving forward, here's what we're going to do. Right. And once you implement this Matthew 18 concept, man, you'll just find that you guys will keep short accounts, and you'll find that leadership will win over friendship. It's another way of saying leadership over friendship. In other words, we're going to deal with the difficult conversations. When it comes down to friendship over leadership, it's usually a difficult situation or a difficult decision or a difficult conversation. Right. And that gets really solved if you live in the Matthew 18.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We implemented it, and it never really gained traction in our staff meetings. But what I noticed is because I brought it up so much, people didn't want to have to talk about it in the staff meeting, so they started having those conversations.
That's right.
Outside of the staff meeting and in more of a one-on-one setting first, and so I see how that when you implement that system, I can see how it allows leadership to win.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you said, hey, they're doing it on the outside. I'll say it's probably been, at least 8 or 9 months that I've said anything on Matthew 18. Nobody says a word. Okay, if you got a problem with anybody, make sure you guys deal with it. Even though it's been 9 months, I'm still not taking it off the agenda.
Right.
Because it's embedded in our culture. So it's been 9 months since someone brought something up. But also, they're all having these healthy conversations, and no one's putting friendship over leadership, and it doesn't need to be brought up here because they deal with it. It's just normal. Awesome. So it's been 9 months, but I'll never take it off because I want it to be part of the culture.
Wow, that's encouraging. Yeah.
Yep.
Great,
what else
man.
You got?
That helps. Yeah, one of these ones is more specific for kind of my situation, but and it's kind of around the idea of retiring. But I say that because I know in the kingdom of God there is no retirement. People will serve until Jesus takes them. But talking about certain paid staff, how do you have a healthy way of talking about transitioning on to maybe what's next for them if you as the leader don't see either their role working or continuing on, I guess is the better word, continuing on your staff, or you want to see you want to restaff according to a vision. So how do you have that healthy conversation about transitioning just in one of those conversations that's delicate, but they don't teach you that in seminary. I've been wrestling with a lot of those questions. So
those are never easy and those are never fun. Now, I do think there's a difference between transitioning someone off the team or transitioning someone into a different area. Those are two different conversations and two different pathways. If you are talking about transitioning someone off the team, in most cases, I'm not saying it's true for you, but in most cases, the pastor is avoiding the inevitable difficult conversation. If it's transitioning off the team. So when they know it's time to transition them off the team, I find pastors will prolong it. I find pastors will put it off. I find pastors will wait 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. Sometimes, I'm not saying this is the situation, but sometimes if that person's a little bit toxic or they could be toxic. And if your staff starts to notice it, it's usually too late. You have to recognize it earlier than them. Or it could be that they're a weak leader and they're not following through, they're not delivering, and everybody notices it. The worst thing you could do for your strong team members is to tolerate a weak one. And so you have to deal with that situation. That's totally different. So if it's like, I got to transition them off the team, that just comes down to a difficult conversation. And it comes down to, but if you feel like it's a monkey on your back, the only way to get rid of it is deal with it. Yeah. And I'm just going to tell you, when I'm in a transition conversation, now that assumes I've already met with them once or twice. I've already sort of warned them. I've already sort of, I've done sort of the pre-meetings. I don't think it's like meeting one, but if it's like, second or third time, usually for me it's the third time. If I'm going to do a transition, just so you know, you might be fine, but I think for anybody that's listening, this might help them. When I'm doing a transition and I've already met with them a couple times, I get right to the point in the meeting. I mean, I think it is. I think it is patronizing to not get right to the point. So I just, right with the person, Brandon, I need to talk to you, man. Okay, we sit down. Man, I've talked to you a couple times, and there's not improvement, and it hasn't changed, and it's left me in a position where I need to transition you off the team. Dude, I'm there in 60 seconds. Everything else I think is patronizing in that situation. Yeah. And most of the time, they're not too shocked by it. Not all the time, but most of the time they're like, okay, this is the third time we've talked about it. I know it. They got butterflies in their stomach. They know what's about to happen. Don't patronize. You're a really great guy, and I love you, and God's got a plan for you. I think that's great. Say that all after, but get to the point. Pull the Band-Aid. And I think it's respectful. Now, if it is, you talked about transitioning someone, and I said, okay, if it's off the team, that's one thing. If they are on the team and you're going to transition them to a different position, I think that's a conversation that's just, I think it's an honest conversation. Like, hey man, I love you in this, I love you on my team. I want to move you to this position because I think you would do better there, and I want to move someone else into this position. I want to win, and I want to move you into another position. If you're moving them to another position because you truly feel they're a good leader, good leader, whatever, they're solid people, and you really feel the right thing is to transition them into a different role, they might get their feelings hurt a little bit, but and you don't want that, obviously, but it's just say, hey, Brandon, love you, man, and I want you to win, but I want the organization to win too. And I'm making some changes. One of them changes includes you. I just need you to play a different spot on the team. Right now you're at second base. I need you at shortstop. I just need you to move over to another position. And that's all, because I need someone to move in. It fits better for the vision. I think it's healthier for you. Hopefully they understand that. Hopefully their heart is right for that. But again, when you're dealing with either of those, you have to always know when you're going into a difficult conversation, is this a discussion or is this a decision? You have to know that. Yeah. There are times I go in and I'm discussing, like, I don't know, maybe it's a discussion on something that's happening in their life and it's big, and something that maybe a change that I'm thinking about meeting, and how are they feeling about their position? That's a discussion. Are you feeling good about it? Do you feel like you'd want to make a move in the church somewhere? You ever thought about maybe here or there, or do you like it here? Like, you're going in open for a discussion, but you have to determine going into it, is this a discussion or is this a decision? Because if you don't go into it determine it, you seem like you're waffling. You don't want to do that. Right. Either you're coming in to discuss it, or you're coming in because you've made a decision. Discussion or decision, but you have to decide.
What about when money's involved, right? Like, hey, this new role is going to be, I envision it being a voluntary position versus a paid position.
Yeah, that's a different one altogether. I got a couple minutes left before I have to jump, but the short version of that is, and we can talk about this offline, that is a different situation because that is probably the first conversation. You're transitioning them off the staff. And you're just saying, I just don't have the finances. And I think that these areas is where I need to do more investing. And I'm sorry, but I need to transition you off the staff because I need to invest in different areas. And I'd love to have you around. I'd love for you to serve. I'd love for you to be a part of the team. Be generous with them on their severance. Be generous with them and giving them a nice on-ramp as long as their heart's right, or off-ramp, whatever, however you want to do it. Be kind and generous. As long as they're good, be kind and generous. However, again, you got to pull that Band-Aid and just say, I'm wanting to invest in different areas. And just like in anything in life, when you want to invest in a different area, it means you have to change something. You can't just invest over here. You only have so much time. You only have so much money.
Right.
So I want to invest, and I'm going to invest in here. It means I need to make a change with you. I need to pull you off of paid staff. And now I'd still love to have you on the staff if that's your choice, or I'd like to have you in a volunteer position, a leadership position. That's your choice, but I've got to reallocate this money. And that definitely is a tougher situation. That's a tougher one. And how they act and respond will determine how you act and respond in your level of generosity and kindness and all that stuff. You want to err on generosity as long as they do, but I hope that helps, man.
Yeah.
Great conversation, though. This is great, man, because everybody deals with it, and you brought up something everybody deals with. So, man, thanks so much for thanks for being on, dude. These are great conversation, great questions. I really, really do it, and thanks for jumping on today, Brandon. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Pastor Chris.
All right, buddy. Have a good day.
All right.
Have a good day, man.
Okay.
See ya. Hey, thanks so much for checking out today's conversation on staff transitions. Want to remind you to check out churchboom.org and sign up for Church Boom University. It is an ongoing learning for you where we are sending you books and you can check out masterclasses and grow together and develop. We have exclusive webinars that we do just for Church Boom University members. You're going to love it, and we should all be growing as leaders, and this is a way for you to do that. Don't forget also to follow us on social media. Instagram is church.boom and Facebook is Church Boom, and there's a lot of great content you'll love there, so make sure to follow us on those channels as well. We will see you next time on the Fly on the Wall podcast.